What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Savage Rounds. Today I've got my UFC Vegas 75 matchmaking video for you. I've got mostly winners, and then it looks like just two losers this time. It'll just usually be a mix. The bigger fighters are the fighters who I think are taking a step up, or just whoever I want to talk about for their next matchup. But yeah, so tonight we're doing Nicholas Dalby, Manuel Torres, Pat Sabatini, Christian Leroy Duncan, Armin Petrosian, Armin Sarukian, Marvin Vettori, and Jared Cannonier. So first up, Nicholas Dalby. He's just coming off of a really good performance against Muslim Salikov. He was able to outlast him over 3 rounds, use his cardio as a weapon. Really good performance from him. And I think he's on a 3-fight winning streak, I believe. Let me take a look real quick. Yeah, so that's 3 in a row for him now. And he lost 1 before that. And then I think in the UFC, he only has 1 loss. So I think he needs to take a step up here and fight somebody who's also going to be in a position looking to get in the rankings. I think you make this fight. Nicholas Dalby versus Joaquin Buckley. Winner gets to start looking towards the rankings. Most likely somebody at the bottom of the rankings losing, or maybe they'll have to do kind of one more like next in line for the ranking spot fight. But yeah, I think this would be a really interesting matchup too. The much bigger, I don't want to say much bigger, but I think Dalby will be the taller guy. Hold up, yeah, 5'11". I actually don't even know. I don't know how tall Joaquin Buckley is off the top of my head. But I think he would be the slightly taller guy with the better cardio. He could push his kickboxing, a lot of kicking to the body, jumping in and out with his kind of bouncy karate stance. And then Buckley looking for the big shots. He looked really good in his 170 debut. So I think this would be a really interesting fight. And like I said, winner gets to look towards rankings. Next up, Manuel Torres. He gets a huge knockout in the first round over Nicholas Mata with a huge counter elbow that could end up being a knockout of the year contender. It was insane. And in his second fight in the UFC, he's undefeated still. 2 first-round finishes. There's no reason to rush him yet. Kind of stay at this level. Maybe a guy that was at like the bottom of the just outside the rankings guys, like the 16 to 30-ish range. He's at the bottom of that and maybe just lost a fight. That's kind of where I see this. And like Ignacio Bahamondes passed this test. Daniel Zellhuber, I believe, lost to Ogden. I think he did. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, Ogden. I'm going with Ogden. I think this matchup was scheduled not too long ago, and it ended up falling out. But I think just run this one back. It's just another good one. A different type of test for Manuel Torres in the UFC. A bigger, longer kickboxer, wrestling type who'll stay at range, like I said, use his kicks, and who'll push you up against the fence, use his size, try and grapple a little bit. Got good submissions as well. So I think this would be just a different type of test for Manuel Torres to see before you start stepping up and giving him really, really good guys. And then next up, Pat Sabatini. He was on a nice little streak before getting knocked out by Dane Jackson, and I think this fight was good to get him back on track. He showed if you give him a guy who's at least not a good wrestler, they won't have a chance versus him. Doesn't have good takedown defense. They won't have a chance just because of how good his wrestling and his submission game is, his ground and pound game. And so he's still a pretty high level fighter, but he needs more wins before we can start talking about that ranking spot. I can't remember if he ever got ranked. He probably got pretty close, but maybe not quite. If he did, he just barely touched 15 or 14 or something, but I don't think he ever quite got there. So this is just kind of a next step fight. You lost. You got your get back fight with Almeida. Now you fight Hakeem Dawodu. I think he was also just outside or just barely inside the rankings for a little bit. Then he lost. Hasn't been the best since then. Both guys, like I said, just kind of outside, maybe at the bottom of that 15 to 20 or 16 to 25-ish range at featherweight. So just a matchup for one of them to take another step up and start moving back towards the rankings, or back towards just outside the rankings to get into them. But yeah, I like this fight for Sabatini. Good one for Dawodu as well, with both guys needing a pretty good win, or a better name win. Moving on, Christian Leroy Duncan coming off a loss to Armen Petrosyan. He's 1-1 in the UFC now after his first fight. That win kind of being a weird one, with Dusko Todorovic blowing his knee out and just not being able to continue. They didn't even really get to fight. It was probably right before halfway through the first round, so we didn't really get to see much happen. Now he loses versus Armen Petrosyan. There was big expectations on him coming out of Cage Warriors. I think he needs to fight another guy who was kind of been up and down. I won't say Christian Leroy Duncan's been up and down in his UFC career, but I think he should fight a guy that's been up and down in his UFC career, also looking to get wins under his belt in the promotion. Both these guys need a good performance to kind of I won't even, because it's so early for Christian Leroy Duncan. This is fight 2. So yeah, it's just a kind of get back on your horse fight. Same for this guy if he can win, Julian Marquez. I think it's a good spot for both of them. A more inexperienced fighter for Marquez to see if he can get back on track. More inexperienced in the UFC, I mean. And just a guy who's, like I said, been up and down in his UFC career so far, just coming off of a loss. Julian Marquez, I think this is a good spot for both of them. One of them needs to get a win. And yeah, I think this would be a fun fight as well. Hopefully we can see Christian Leroy Duncan kind of up his output and use his hands a little bit more. And I think this could be a really fun fight for both of them. Moving on, I've got the winner of the last fight, Armen Petrosyan. He just beat Christian Leroy Duncan. And for him, he's on a nice little streak. Let me pull that up real quick. So he is on a 2-fight winning streak, 3-1 in the UFC, only losing to Kyle Braulio, who's due for a big fight pretty soon. He's on a really nice winning streak since coming into the UFC, undefeated so far. And this is a good spot for Petrosyan to keep moving up. I think for him, it's time. He is now in that 15 to 25 type range, where a fight right here and maybe one more win will get him looking at a bottom, like 15 to 10 ranked opponent if he can get those 2 more wins. And I think he can fight a guy who was in the rankings for a little bit, took a few losses, and is here now also, needing a win to look back towards the rankings. Edmen Shahbazyan. I like this fight for both of them. Like I said, Edmen fighting guys who can take him down and do a lot of good work in the grappling, and you see he doesn't really do well in those spots. Armen Petrosyan, we haven't really seen, other than Kyle Braulio, we haven't really seen him be tested too much on the ground. I do think in this spot, Shahbazyan would probably be the better grappler here. Or not probably, would definitely be the better grappler here. I just don't know how much he would definitely mix it in. It wouldn't be his main focus, though. I think you'd get pretty good stand-up in this fight. So a chance for both of these guys to show off their main strength and look back towards the rankings for Arman Tsarukyan, or take your first step towards getting a ranked opponent for Armen Petrosyan. Next up, the other Armen on the card, Arman Tsarukyan. I've seen a lot of people saying it on Twitter, he should fight Charles Oliveira next, or he's one fight away from a title shot. I really like Arman Tsarukyan, and he's been really good so far. He has some good wins under his belt. The Joaquin Silva one, he's a tough guy, um, and his last one before this, Demiris Magulov. That's a good win as well. Ismagulov hasn't had the easiest run in the UFC so far. He's fought a lot of really tough guys and been on the wrong side of some fights. Gamrot, that was another really good opponent, but I just think, and he lost that one, so I just think he still needs to build a little bit more. He's not ready for that top 5 rank yet. I think he should fight another guy. Actually, I probably should have checked what this guy is ranked, but just lost to Charles Oliveira. Beneil Dariush, I may now sound stupid saying not a top 5 ranked guy, since I just said that, but I can't think of what Dariush is ranked. I think he was 4 before this, or before the Oliveira fight, so I don't think he's in the top 5 anymore. Probably just outside, I'd say 6, maybe he is 5, I don't even know. But I think this is just a good spot before he gets that big title eliminator type fight, because I think that's what people want in the Charles Oliveira one, but I don't think it's quite time for that yet for him. This would be another huge spot to prove himself versus Beneil Dariush. Gamrot beat him, and Gamrot couldn't beat Beneil Dariush, so it'd be interesting to see how Arman Tsarukyan did, considering how close that fight was with Gamrot. I think this would be a really fun one, and for Beneil Dariush, a spot to get back in the win column and work back towards that title shot. Obviously, his next fight wouldn't be a title eliminator. He probably needs 1 or 2, or I'll say 2 or 3 wins before he can have another title eliminator type fight, just because of how stacked and busy the top 5 or the top of lightweight seems to be right now. But yeah, just a lot of young prospects coming up, so I think he would need a few more wins, and I think this is a good spot to get himself back in that win column for either of these guys to move towards the rank, or move towards a title eliminator, back 2 for Beneil, and working towards that for the first time for Arman. Next up, we get into the main event from UFC Vegas 75. The loser, Marvin Vettori. Tough outing for him. His chin was crazy, and just the way he moved forward after still being hurt, or still moved forward after being hurt, was wild. I had 2 fights that are coming up that'll be for these next 2 guys, and I just think they're good spots. Vettori will need to get back in the win column with his next fight to move back towards Israel Adesanya, which will be probably a little bit of a longer road for him, considering he's lost to Israel twice already. So unless a new champion in 185 comes around, I think Vettori will probably need 3-ish wins before he can start talking about a title eliminator again. And there's some guys coming up that he hasn't fought yet, considering how many people he's fought at the top here, because he's been at the top for a few years now, of this 185 division. Hasn't fought either of these guys, and they have a fight coming up soon. Sean Strickland, Abus Magomedov. I think Vettori fights the winner of this one. It's a huge step in competition for Abus. I know he fought in PFL and was in a championship, I believe, or maybe it was a semifinal. I think it was a championship match, but I can't really remember off the top of my head. And Sean Strickland, coming off of, I think, his last fight. No, he fought Imavov and won at the beginning of this year. So he lost to Cannonier and then fought Imavov. Hold on, let me double check. But either way, I think the winner of this one, it'll be a good step up, because I think Marvin, he'll probably be, if I had to guess, 5, and then the winner of this one will be in that 6, 7, 8 range. So it'll just be a good matchup. One guy coming up, one guy coming off a loss, looking to move up. So I think that would be a fun one. And then for Jared Cannonier, it's kind of tough because Israel's fought everybody at the top of this division, so there's not too many options for everyone. And like I said, there's another matchup coming up soon where I'm pretty sure I don't think Jared Cannonier has fought either of these guys. So whoever wins this matchup, Paulo Costa, Ikram Aliskerov, and like same with Abus Magomedov. This is a huge step up for Aliskerov. We saw what he could do in Brave. He comes in to the UFC in his debut and puts Phil Hawes out with a crazy uppercut. It was sick. We all know what Paulo Costa can do. They think Aliskerov's ready to be thrown to the wolves right away. So it'll be pretty cool to see how he handles that. Paulo Costa's a tough matchup for anybody, so we've got this fight coming up. Cannonier hasn't fought Paulo Costa yet. Obviously hasn't fought Aliskerov. And I think this would be a good matchup to obviously start working back towards Adesanya for Cannonier or Paulo Costa, or if Aliskerov wins, a good fight for him to start moving towards that first title shot in the UFC. So yeah, that's all I have for matchmaking for UFC Vegas 75. This upcoming weekend, we've got UFC Jacksonville, Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria. There's some pretty good fights on this card. I've seen a lot of people not liking it on Twitter, but I think there's some pretty solid fights, some sneaky good ones. So we will talk about that on Thursday. Yeah, I'll have that video up Thursday. So peace out.